The Honest Garage Podcast, where real shop owners tell real shop stories.
Today on the Honest Garage Podcast, we're talking with a shop owner who took over a small Mountain Bay operation and has been grinding to keep it at a standard he's proud to put his name on. Wiley Faris is the owner of Landmark Automotive in Conifer, Colorado, serving drivers along the 285 corridor with full-service auto repair and maintenance. Landmark's been a fixture in the Pine Junction and Conifer area for more than a decade. It was first opened by Jim and Susie Land, and in 2023, Wiley stepped in as the new owner after years of running the shop and working in the automotive industry since the late 90s on both the service and sales side. Under Wiley's leadership, Landmark has stayed busy by focusing on straight talk, quality work at a fair price, and transparency with customers, building a reputation that has people towing their vehicle past the big chains to get to his little bay in Conifer. He's also thinking about what's next, from keeping an older facility up to modern standards to exploring ideas like mobile service for his community. And in this episode, we're going to dig into how Wiley stepped into ownership, what it's like to grow a small footprint shop in a mountain town, and how he's working to keep Landmark known for honesty and relationship, not just repairs. Wiley, welcome to the Honest Garage Podcast. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, David.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you here. How's everything going today?
It's going. Like I said earlier, it's our fourth Monday of the week and hopefully last one. The guys are busy working in their bays on broken cars, and I think I've already taken 15 phone calls this morning to schedule appointments. So
That's
as busy
awesome.
as we can possibly be, yeah.
I know a lot of shop owners can relate to that, and I know there are going to be other listeners out there who maybe can't relate to being that busy. And hopefully this show will help them out. But for the folks who don't know your story or your background or who haven't talked with you before, how'd you first get connected with this shop? And what made you decide to eventually take it over and run it your way?
So how I initially got connected with this shop here, Landmark in Conifer, I was running another larger automotive repair facility that was also attached to a used car dealership in the city in Inglewood. And I had been there for several years and had worked myself into a general manager position after starting out as a service advisor. And prior to working at this shop, obviously had ran and worked at many busy shops in the city. But this one was really difficult to work for. The owner was struggling with various different aspects of his personal life, which were bleeding into the business. And I was just having a hard time seeing him as an honest repair facility owner. And so for me, it was difficult to get on board with his business model, right? He would have, in some instances, he would have me call and get customers and let them know, hey, your car's going to be done today. Can we go ahead and get the ticket paid? So in many instances, he was pressuring me to collect money prior to the car being deliverable. And
Wow.
so it was hard for me to get on board with somebody doing business that way, because we don't deliver cars until the mechanic finishes them, road tests them, and then I try to put my butt in as many seats as possible and road test them myself, or I have my service advisor do it. Then we call the customer and tell them to come get your vehicle and pay us. But ultimately, it was a shop where I was having a hard time feeling like I was at home and I was part of an honest organization, and had finally reached my limit with the owner having brought me into the inner fold of the business. I reached my limit with everything that was going on, and in a very hasty decision, quit on the spot and offered, of course, 2 weeks, as I always have. That's how I was raised. And I think he was so mad and hurt that he didn't want me to come back and work my 2 weeks, which in that 2 weeks, I would have been finding another job. But in this particular instance, I didn't have 2 weeks. I've got 3 kids. I've got properties. I've got car payment, everything that every other blue collar guy has. So I grew very anxious and nervous in that moment. And I threw up a prayer to my Lord and Savior. I started looking through Craigslist and Marketplace, just all the places where we look for work, and ran across the ad. They were running for a service advisor here for a small shop in Conifer. The ad was 3 weeks old, and I called on it anyways, thinking in the back of my head, there's no way they haven't filled it. But they called me back just about 15 minutes later and said, hey, we're still looking to fill this position. Do you want to come up and interview? So I came up, the story kind of writes itself from there, but found out very quickly in the interview process and then a working interview process that the owners I was going to be working for were very honest people, very straightforward, very transparent. We shared a lot of common ground together. And so immediately feeling this is a shop where I could call it home, I could effectively retire from this shop because I saw it immediately as a very reputable, very honest operation, and of course, super busy. Since I took over the operations back in 2016, I don't think I've ever scheduled shorter than 2 weeks out. And sometimes we'll be 6 weeks out, depending on what kind of vehicles we have in the shop, technicians' vacation time, holidays, stuff like that. There's been times when we've been 6 weeks out. And people are like, I don't care. I'm not taking my car anywhere else. I'd like to get on your schedule. So I found out very quickly that this was a shop that I did want to attach myself to. And through the course of operating the day-to-days for the owners who were remote at this point, I built an amazing clientele. I've been able to develop some amazing relationships with the people in the community here. And I feel like in order to do a good, honest business, you've got to be able to cross that line from customer to friend, to someone you actually care about. You care about their situation, their kids, what their car actually needs so that they can continue the lifestyle that they need to. And so after working here for many years and coming to the decision that me and the other shop foreman that was here, and I never really wanted to be a shop owner by myself initially, and me and the original shop foreman here were talking about either potentially buying this shop or a shop somewhere else. We were looking at a shop in Wyoming, and his wife got diagnosed with a neurological disorder that they were having a hard time treating. And through the course of that and the politics here in Colorado, Chris, my old shop foreman, just up and left to Kentucky, bought a shop, full operation, turnkey, and left me. And I wasn't by any means mad. Love Chris and Kira and wanted the best for them. And so that kind of left me in a position as to whether or not I wanted to move forward with being a shop owner by myself. And I never really did. I never really saw me as a shop owner. I didn't want the headache. I didn't want to be that last guy, the buck stops here guy. I didn't want to have the buck stop on me. So through a lot of prayer and reflection time with my Lord, the answer became very clear to me that this was not going to be my operation anyways, that I was simply taking it over, taking responsibility for it, but that I was to run it for a higher power, for a greater cause. And so after battling it out, going back and forth, and many discussions with my wife, I decided this is not something I want, and then got a very clear answer from God that it doesn't really matter what I want. The goal is to serve a greater purpose and glorify something greater, which is my Lord and Savior. So that effectively kind of wraps up how I ended up as a shop owner here at Landmark. Was I was treated amazing by the owners. I was able to develop actual relationships with my community, and then was given a very clear and obvious sign from a higher power that this is what I am supposed to be doing with my life right now. And so that was it. Started just stressing out and figuring out how to get the money, how to come up with the down payment. And I had been saving money because me and Chris had talked about buying into a shop together. So I had been saving my money. I was able to sell some personal property that I had, which kind of bridged that gap for me. And I was able to put it all together and buy the shop from Jim and Susie. And that's been over 2 years ago now. It'll be 3 years coming this May. Nothing's really changed. I mean, I kept the same exact business cards that Jim and Susie had because I was so afraid of going away from what we had created here because it works so well. The shop practically runs itself. I could walk away from it for 2-3 days in the middle of the week and I'm not worried about, or is there going to be enough cars to work on? Or are we going to close enough tickets to pay the bills that we have? That's really never been a worry. And I wholeheartedly believe it's because I've cast my faith 100% in a greater power, my greater power. So that's the long and short of what got me into this shop was working for, prior to this shop, I had worked for very few, if any, owners that I felt were really honest and doing a good service for their customers. So I think the Lord just sewed this together. He put me and Jim and Susie together. I still talk to Jim weekly almost. And sadly, Susie passed away recently. I would have conversations with her every few months because I would have a question about the back office or something having to do with the books or the accounting. And it was very much ordained, if you ask me. I believe 100% that it was set in motion long, long time ago, that this was the Lord's plan for me to be in this shop right when I was. The Lord's plan was to put me through working with bad owners and dishonest shops. There's a lot to be said for the refining that you allow the Lord to do so that you can really recognize Him and what's good. And yeah, that's it. That's why I'm here today.
That's awesome, man. You touched on a lot there that I think is going to be really valuable for people listening to the show. But you touched on one thing in particular that I think is incredibly unique. And for those people who don't know your shop and don't know your area, you mentioned you're booked out 6 weeks. And I know you're working out of a relatively small bay compared to a lot of the bigger operations and some of the ones that you even came from yourself in the past. And I'm curious, what are some of the challenges that you faced with running Landmark, and how do you work around the limitations of the space? Can you talk us through that a little bit?
I think for me, the biggest obstacle to overcome, especially after losing my shop foreman, who was obviously a master mechanic. He was one of those rare mechanics that comes along. I've only worked with probably maybe 5 guys like this in my whole career. Not only were they amazing mechanics, but they were really good employees too. They showed up on time with a good attitude, ready to work. They were loyal. And so my biggest obstacle was replacing my shop foreman. At the time that Chris was here, we had another master mechanic. His name is Doug, quite a bit older gentleman, has been working on cars much longer than Chris, but never went through the same kind of education process that did. Doug's in his 60s, so he learned by experience, right? Started turning wrenches in a tire shop when he was 14 years old. He's the kind of guy that's worked on everything. He knows all the tricks. He knows all the shortcuts. Chris was younger. He had a little bit more of a technological mind. However, when Chris left, I went ahead and moved Doug into my shop foreman position. And together we have been just educating ourselves about all of the new stuff that's coming out. But what was really difficult was finding a replacement for Doug. Having made Doug my shop foreman, a working foreman, my next obstacle was to find someone to fill Doug's shoes. I need another master mechanic working next to Doug. And that proved to be impossible because I never did find it. I shouldn't say never, but I hadn't found it until about 4 months ago. And so my biggest obstacle was finding a good mechanic who was also a good employee. I think a lot of guys that have gone through what I've gone through and seen what I've seen in the business will agree that you rarely get an amazing mechanic and an amazing employee. You almost never get that combination. You'll get an amazing mechanic who can fix anything. He's super smart, but he's a prima donna, or he's arrogant when he doesn't think he has to be there at 8 a.m. Or he can go home at 4:30 instead of 5, or take an hour-long lunch instead of a half-hour lunch. So it was, for me, even prior to becoming a shop owner and having been running shops, GM, manager, sales manager, whatever, I never struggled finding good talent, good mechanics prior to stepping into an ownership role here. And I think a lot of that has to do with the economic change, what we've seen happen in our country recently, the fact that there's a significant shortage of blue collar workers or tradesmen in this country now, because at one point we were all telling our kids they need to go to college and get a degree to make good money, which we now know is not true. And we're starting to see that influx of younger people starting to take an interest in trade work, where for a long time, there's this huge void because everybody's going to school to get their underwater basket weaving degree, thinking that they're going to make $100,000 when they get out of college. And you and I know that's not the case. That's rarely the case.
Shout out to the 1 in a million underwater basket weavers out there who are $1 million
a year.
But yeah, I agree. That's not the case, and it's really hard to, in any industry, I think, find. You hit on something there that I really want to focus on for just a second about that: a good employee versus good at their job. And I think there are things that make you a good employee and things that make you good at actually doing the work.
Agreed.
And the work is so technical in this industry, and there's so much that you have to learn that the pool of qualified candidates is small. And then finding good employees within that pool can be a real challenge.
Right.
So
You could come across an amazing mechanic who is everything you wanted to be in a mechanic, but he doesn't show up on time, or he leaves work early, or he calls in. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have a guy that's super loyal, great attitude, shows up every day, never calls in, but he's not very good at turning wrenches and fixing cars and getting them out the door. So,
right.
so what I did, I said, you know what? I'm not going to try and find that guy because I'm pulling my hair out, which I don't have much anyways to pull out. So I'm pulling my hair out, trying to find this mechanic who in the past I've hired before, right? At other shops. When I first got into the business, I was working at a 50 bay independent repair facility. We would have a stack this thick of qualified mechanics resumes sitting in the drawer that at any point I could reach in and pull one out and have a decent mechanic on staff. But when I moved into this position, I realized that's not the case. The employment field has changed a lot. So I said, you know what, forget that. I'm going to hire someone who I can see is a good employee, but doesn't have much experience. And then I will just train them. I will have Doug train them in the back. I will train them in the front if that's what they want to do. And then I'm ensuring that I'm getting what I want. If I realize very quickly that they're unmoldable and not teachable, then down the road they go. But I've been very blessed because I found a young man in his early 20s. I actually hired him when he was a teenager. And Josh has been everything that I've ever needed in an employee, but we've been able to train him to work on cars. He did have a decent amount of automotive experience coming into my shop, but it was very superficial: tires, brakes, stuff like that. We brought him in, taught him how to fix broken cars. And then I thought, if you're interested, do you want to maybe run the front? And I was very fortunate in that frame of time to have another master mechanic show up looking for work. He had just moved from Texas.
That's
and
great.
So we hired Steve and kept Josh as kind of a go-to utility guy. He does a little of this, he does a little of that. He'll run parts down for me. He'll do brake jobs. He'll do small repairs that require mechanical diagnosing, fluid leaks. But then on the other side of that, I can walk away from the shop. I can go play golf in the middle of the day. Josh can answer the phone, schedule customers, build estimates, sell the work, procure the parts, close the ticket. So, at one point, because I was facing such a huge obstacle, which I couldn't get over, I just said, you know what, I'm going to change the parameters in which I'm going to try and overcome this obstacle. And that was it. We've been running real smooth ever since. Let's see, I hired Josh, I guess, almost 2 years ago now. And with him here, myself, my shop foreman, and my master mechanic, it's really been a blessing just to have all these three guys come together and work with me at this time in my life where it's been such a blessing. So that, I think, I would say is the biggest obstacle I've had to overcome as a shop owner, is finding good, reliable, talented help.
Yeah, that's a common problem that guests on the show have and other shop owners have. It's a common problem even on the marketing side with what I do, finding good help. And I think that if you change what you're looking for and you stop looking for the perfect fit in terms of skill set, a lot of times you can find a perfect fit for your culture and mold them into the skill set. And that sounds exactly like the approach that has finally started to click for you guys, which is great. So limitations
for over
on
a year,
time.
it was just me and Doug. And I'll tell you what, I can hold my own turning wrenches in a shop. But it was really getting to the point where I was like, this is hard, working on the cars, writing the tickets, taking in the cut, doing all of it. was really starting to wear on me. And I was like, something's got to change. We did that for over a year.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of people might be, because how many bays is your shop?
The size of my shop's roughly 2.5 bays inside. I've got 2 lifts. And then the half bay we use for working on smaller stuff. Like we've got a few quads around here. Every once in a while, we'll have a customer drop a quad off that if it's carbureted, I got 2 old guys that know how to work on carburetors. So we try to help as much as possible, but it's really 2 operational bays with 2 racks. And then in order for me to get all the cars through in an efficient manner, me and Josh will work on cars outside on the flat. So we'll do tires out there, we'll do brakes out there, we'll do control arms out there. Anything that we don't really need a lift to safely work on the car for, we'll do outside. We'll crawl under them, we'll flat back oil changes, we'll get our jack stands out there. We'll do really whatever we have to do to keep the shop flow moving. And then, like I said, my shop foreman and my master mechanic are not opposed to working on cars outside. Given their age, they spent a decent amount of their career working on cars without a lift. And not that I use that as an excuse to say, you get out there and work on the flat, boy, I don't care. Because it behooves me and Landmark to have cars in the shop on a rack, right? It's safer. My insurance company loves when I do that. They hate when I work on cars outside, rightfully. But we will do, at one point this summer, we had 3 cars out front, completely tore apart, getting worked on. And then, of course, we had our bays moving cars in and out. And we were like that for 6 or 7 weeks this summer, just jammed to where you couldn't park one more car on my lot if you tried. You couldn't get a motorcycle in here. We really will do, and it's not about being able to take in more work so that looks better on our bottom line. It really is more about helping the community, right? We have so many people up here that we service. And there's a handful of good options up here for independent repair facilities, but I'm finding out that mine is the most affordable. And because I have 2 really good mechanics, word gets around fast in a small town. And I get a lot of my older male customers that know me really well. They'll just walk into the garage and they'll start talking to the mechanics. And a lot of shops are like, oh, you can't do that. But the reality is that I'm building relationships here, right? I want to be part of this community. So in order to do that, I've got to be vulnerable. I've got to let my customers in, not just to my business, but I got to let them in to me and my guys, right? That's how you build relationship with strangers. And I've always said in my interview processes, when I'm looking to start a new job or whatever, I've always told my potential employers, I truly believe I don't sell work. I want to get to a point with a customer where all I'm doing is telling them about their car and letting them make the educated decision as to what they want me to do to help them. That's right. It. And I want them to feel like that. I want them to feel like I'm a friend and I'm saying, hey, here's what you should or shouldn't do with this car. What would you like to do? And I feel like that approach is very easy to then get the work, right? And ultimately my goal is to help this person that's in front of me, because if you show up to automotive repair facility without an appointment and you're there unexpectedly, you need help. You're in a bad spot, right? Try to recognize that and help those people. At the end of the day, the money's going to come. As long as I keep turning my bays over, the money's going to come. That's not something I worry about. My God's going to take care of me. I know that. But what I have to do is I've got to love my neighbor, right? And so if I'm doing what I'm called to do from my higher power, then he's going to do what he's supposed to do. And that's he's going to continue blessing me. As long as I'm glorifying him in all of this, there's no worries. Even when I was struggling and stressing out about finding another mechanic, we did fine. I never missed payroll. I never missed rent. I never missed paying my loan back. You know what I'm saying? It never happened. I think for me in this part of town, it's always been more about developing those relationships rather than trying to sell the work.
So you mentioned one thing in there, I think that's going to maybe shock a lot of the listeners about having some of your mechanics going out and doing flat back oil changes still especially up in the mountains and stuff like that. And I think that it really speaks a lot to what you guys are doing there in the shop. It's not necessarily the expectation of your team, but it's your team's desire to give back to the community and your
Right.
team's desire to keep everybody on the road and to serve the community. I think that really is driving their willingness to go and do that, when it might be easier to go and find a shop to work with that has multiple lifts
Sure.
that are open.
And there'll be instances where I'm like, hey, I get it. I'm busy. I'm sorry I can't cater to you better. I've got a couple of good buddies of mine that have independent repair facilities up here, and I do my best to refer anybody that I can to them. But at the end of the day, it's if I have somebody in front of me and they come in and they're telling me that they've got a hub bearing coming apart and their truck needs shocks and a timing belt, and they're just giving me this big bowl of gravy, but I don't have the opportunity to do it in my shop, rather than say, a lot of shop owners, and I learned this from working with them, they'll say, oh yeah, we'll get it in, but drop it off, we'll get it in. And then a week later, they haven't even started working on now you got a hot customer. And I don't want that. I don't want to have any part of that. And despite the fact that I'm like, oh, you want to give me your gravy bowl, you want to pour your gravy bowl out onto one of my mechanics, that's great. I don't have the time to do it. Will you please go see my buddy at Track Automotive or Rocky Mountain Auto House? And really, like I said, at the end of the day, the money's going to come as long as I'm turning my bays over and I'm doing a good, honest business. I want people in my community to be safe because I genuinely care about the community I'm working in. I have to share the road with these people. And
Yep.
285 is already very dangerous. You know what I'm saying? People come into my shop and they're talking about loose hub bearings or tie rod ends and stuff like that. I have a desire to see that car get fixed, even if it's not at my shop.
Yeah, so you touched on obviously a very important word to us with the Honest Garage podcast and as the owner of Honest Mechanic Marketing. You touched on that word honest here. And I try to ask every guest that comes on the show, when you hear the phrase honest mechanic or you think about honest shop owner, what does that mean in the day-to-day decisions at Landmark? And how do you want customers to describe you when you're not in the room?
As a straight shooter is how I like to be thought of by my customer base. And there's been instances where I will tell my customer flat out, hey, I got bad news here, but I'm going to go ahead and give it to you straight. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I've got a customer who's got a 340,000 mile Dodge Durango and she's a close personal friend of mine. And I have fixed this car numerous times, but it's getting to the point now where doing an engine repair doesn't make a whole lot of sense versus just doing an engine swap. We're at 340,000 miles. And I tell her, Tracy, I have to be completely honest with you. You don't want to hear what I'm about to say. And she's practically begging to give me this money to fix her car. We're talking thousands of dollars. And I'm like, Tracy, no, I don't want your money. I don't want to fix your car again. Not because I don't want to, but because it's not good for you. It's not good for you and your family to dump a bunch of money into this car again. Get rid of it. So that when I hear honest mechanic, I like to think of guys that are straight shooters. No matter what the news is, they're going to deliver it regardless of how they think you're going to feel afterwards. And I tell customers all the time, hey, I'm really sorry, but I'm delivering terrible news to you right now. It is what it is. And there's plenty of instances where customers are, oh, please fix my truck. Please fix my truck. And I'm like, I don't want to because it's not good for you. I don't want to
Right.
take $7,000 from you and fix a truck that's only worth $3,000. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. I always tell them, however, I will do whatever you want me to do. I always make sure that I'm delivering all of the news, all of the evidence, all of the key facts to the customer, and then I can wash my hands and walk away because now it's up to them to make the decision that's best for them. I've already told them, this car's not worth fixing. Don't fix it. Here's your estimate. Let me know what you want to do. That's kind of what I think of when I hear honest mechanic or an honest shop, is somebody who's not afraid to just say what they need to say so that they can get the information to the customer. I will be honest with you. A lot of the times, at least in my experience, in my career, I've found a lot of the shop they're overly fake, overly nice, I feel like a lot of those guys are not straight shooters, right? They're using this, oh, everything's good and look at me, I'm such a great guy, to kind of sugarcoat that they're really just trying to get as much money out of your pocket into theirs as possible. And like I said, at the end of the day, if me taking $7,000 from you to fix this truck is going to put you in a bad position and then ultimately put me in a bad position because now I'm married to this thing, it's not worth fixing, sir. It's not worth fixing your car, man. And I've offered this service to a lot of my customers, ones that I've done a lot of business with, ones that I've sat down and broke bread with. Hey, if you need help, fine. Because a lot of single women, they don't want to do it. They don't have what it takes to do it. Go shop for a car. You know what I'm saying? Or sell their own car. So a lot of my customers will say, hey, if you need help selling a vehicle, I'll sell it for you. If you need help sourcing a new vehicle, I will also do that for you. So really what it boils down to for me as an honest mechanic is somebody who's willing to do whatever it takes to put that customer in a better situation. Even if I got to go down and test drive a bunch of cars for the customer because they're an old elderly couple, which I've done before, then that's what I'll do. That's what I'll do to keep my customers happy. And again, I think it goes without saying that I'm obviously going to get all their future business. Why would they go anywhere else? And I don't do all of those things to ensure I'm getting that future business. I do all of those things because I'm called to love on my community, right? I've been shown love that I don't deserve. So for me to run my business the way I feel it should be run in this day and age, I have to have that same attitude.
Yeah, that's great, man. And I think you've shared a lot of stuff for anybody listening here. I think there's a lot of stuff that they can learn from your story, from your experience, from your approach, and take some of this small town mentality and apply it to their shops in any city of any size to build their community and to grow their team and to just focus on that honest side of this industry. I think we've unfortunately earned a lot of the bad reputation in the industry. And there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of good right now to try to change that. And I'm really proud to have the conversation and say that you're one of those shops. And
Thank you.
it's really cool to see what you're doing up there in Conifer. So I think that's going to wrap today's episode of the Honest Garage podcast. But before we really sign off the air, I just want to say huge thank you again to you, Wiley, for opening up your business and sharing what's really working in your shop. And before I let you go, for any of the listeners out there, what's the best way for them to connect with you or with Landmark Automotive?
So if somebody needs automotive assistance in the Conifer, Bailey, Evergreen, Morrison, Southwest Littleton area, our phone number here at the shop's 303-816-1407. You can contact us through our website, which is www.landmark-automotive.com. And then our email, you can reach us via email, and that is serviceconifer@landmark-automotive.com. So the long one there. But yeah, we can be reached any one of those ways. I do have access to my voicemail and my email via my telephone. So I'm constantly checking emails. I'm constantly checking voicemails. I try not to work on the weekends, but if somebody's in dire straits, I'll at least reach out to them and see if I can't help over the phone or something like that. My guys are obviously happy to come in and work on weekends, but I try to dissuade that as much as possible. But yeah, if anybody needs us, you can get a hold of us or stop on in. We're here to help.
Man, that's really fantastic. I appreciate you opening up so many ways for people to reach out to you if they have questions. That's awesome. And I just want to say thanks again for your time. Really appreciate you coming on the Honest Garage podcast today. If you got value from this conversation, share it with another shop owner. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Leave us a review. It helps more honest shops find the show. For more resources and real-world marketing help for auto repair shops, head over to honestmechanicmarketing.com. And thanks for listening. And as always, keep it honest in the garage. Thanks.
The analogy that was used even before I started was silos. When I first started, we had 3 advisors. and 6 technicians. The depth of their capability, you'd run it into availability all the time as well. So you'd build your whole schedule out for each technician would be scheduled out for a week or so.
Yeah.
The tricky thing with that is that do the right thing sometimes can be for the customer, sometimes could be for me, sometimes could be for the company, sometimes could be for insert whatever here.